GT6R is our version of this classic tiny Grand Tourer. And there's no denying that with a better power-to-weight ratio than a 911 Turbo, we're due for some fun times. Last episode accomplished a bunch of work up front, such as locating radiators, modifying frame rails, building a whole new crash bar, and at the same time, completely redesigning the hood hinges. Which sounded awesome. Yeah, awesome. And it'll even clear the bumper, right? Right? So here's the thing, we've got a lot of progress to show you today, but it's not without a backstory. And I really don't think you want to go through the whole hour of footage covering it, so let's cut to the chase. Our hood tips forward like an E-type, but unlike the Jag, our bumper stays behind and the hood must swing around it. So to accomplish this, the factory placed the pivots way out front in these so-called overriders, which are ugly, so we cut them off. In their place then were supposed to be some BMW 5 Series hinges, chosen because Simon by Turbo already got them working on his Spitfire, and why reinvent the wheel twice? However, if you actually take a moment, you may notice a distinct lack of bumper on his car, which would have been great for us to see before now as well. As it turns out then, these won't actually work. They swing the hood down too far without pushing it forward enough, and even with longer bars swapped in, that still won't help. Simon got around this whole dilemma by mounting the bumper to the hood, which is a great solution as it completely eliminates the conflict. But it might create a hassle for us to get the car road legal. So instead, we spent a mere 2 months researching and modeling different hinge designs until we finally found one that worked, known as a scissor hinge, which instead of moving the hood forward and down, just does this with it. Cool. Clearance to the doors and sills also had to be considered, but with some math and a full-scale model, we established that all is well. So awesome! We had an issue, persevered, and found a solution. What a motivational story. It's a darn shame not to use those BMW parts, don't you think? I mean, we've got them. And the start of a torsion bar. Perhaps we're just thinking about everything wrong. We've got a new crash bar. That's our protection. And if we simply stop calling the bumper and refer to it as a cover instead, well then we're pretty much in line with a modern car. A crash bar hidden behind a cover. So let's just do that.
And you wonder why they're not done yet.
Sometimes you just have to make a call, and after some final measuring and further review, there is still a small chance we might be able to clear a fixed bumper, but there's really only one way to find out. These parts have been sitting around for a while, so let's start with a quick cleanup. Much better. After bolting them down to the hinges, they got squared up to the tube for tack welding, and that was quickly followed by burning them in place for good. Some of those TIG welds don't even look that awful. It bolted up. We didn't screw anything up too badly. Those are now completely welded up. We'll maybe just do a little bit of flapping just to sort of clean things a little bit, but here's the beauty of this system. I'm going to push one side, and as if by magic, the other side closes too. Originally, each hinge that mounted out here was all on its own. And this side of the hood could flap around in the breeze, and this side of the hood could be buttoned down tight still. And it could just twist the sheet metal of the hood. What we've done here is actually integrate each hinge into the other. And you know, it's 1/8 inch. I'm sure you can flex it if you try hard enough. But it's pretty darn solid from side to side now. And of course, the best thing about having this is what?
What? Now we have BMW components.
Germany represented. The next step that we can do is start to mount this into the hood. That's going to be sort of the most complicated step, I think, of all of this, is figuring out how to tie it in well. But we got some ideas, so we're going to push on with those next and see how it goes. We'll start at the drill press. Okay, it would have been easier to do these before welding everything up, but hey, we're rebels, so we're doing it now. That just looks a little bit more, I don't know, just a little nicer. I might just kind of round the edge even a little bit. And with everything in place, we are extremely tight, but it fits. So that's good. Ultimately, concealing the hinges has been goal number one, but we also want to add structure here too, since from factory, the hood is actually pretty flimsy on these cars and can crack around the headlights if handled incorrectly. So, although that torsion bar is a good start, a couple of tubes running front to back will further tie it into the existing structure and help lock everything together. In concept. First then, let's put a bend partway down to follow the contour of the hood more closely. And while our trusty pipe bender isn't technically the correct tool for the job, we've actually got some great results with it. So, with them both propped in place with some magnets, we're getting a good idea of how it'll look, and can start to flesh out the pieces to connect all this to the torsion bar. Starting with these corners. Adding strength to them used to be this large panel, which joined one side of the nose to the other. But it will no longer fit, so time to fire up the grinder. All right, those are looking pretty good. So the hood's back on, and some F-clamps are helping to set the panel gaps in order to reach inside and mark up a cardboard template for some new brackets. These will be welded to the tubes and bolted to the rest of the sheet metal, so everything can still be removed later for paint. And here's how that reinforcement piece fits in place alongside the new tube and bracket. Happy with things then, the MIG welder was deployed to finally button up the corners, and we'll come back and flap them down sometime later. But meanwhile, let's keep things moving by pushing on with those front brackets, as the cardboard template has done its job and is now transferred to some fresh sheet metal ready for drilling. One hole will be for a captive nut, and the other two will allow a sleeve to be welded in for a second bolt to pass through perpendicular to the first. That's coming together quite nicely. So, on to the next ones. And there you have it, a new set of sturdy brackets that sit flat to each other and maintain the lower two bolts in their factory locations. This has let us partially install the new torsion bar and replace the original tubular structure in the wheel wells, which really beefs things up right off the hop. Water drainage was kept in mind when designing these brackets, and I think they should work out pretty well, but then again, just about anything is better than what it replaces. Only the front two bolts are holding the torsion bar in place right now. So to mark up the position for the rear ones, the 100-pound hood goes back on for yet another time, bolts are tightened up, and we can mark the hole's location with a Sharpie. Thankfully, we can leave the hood in place while we pull the brackets out for drilling. So we got those two ones in the middle there done now. Cross your fingers that they were in the right spot.
You can do better than cross your fingers.
They're in the right spot. Now, this is a moment that we've kind of been waiting for a while. I mean,
we've talked about it for a long time.
It's been several years since the hoods have been on hinges at all. Like, it was the old chassis at this point. And we wanted to get rid of those ugly things sticking out the front and the overriders since the day we bought it back in 2014. So, it's bolted up. It doesn't have all of the extra tubes and everything to provide extra structure, and those will help.
Yeah.
But ultimately, everything that's necessary for the hood to be mounted and hinge is there. He has a notification.
No, it's fine. This is more important.
So, let's do it. Oh, that almost felt like stronger than the original already.
Get your camera.
Yeah!
Come go walk around.
Did you see that? Did you see that?
Yeah, do you see this though? I mean, this is amazing.
There's an LS with air conditioning and a clamshell hood that just opens right up. The rear of the mounts here will get trimmed off, so that last little bit will be gone.
This is comment about the plywood here too.
The wood will be gone. But I mean, that little torsion bar that goes from side to side, that actually looks kind of cool. And then what you're holding there.
This piece, that's pretty much where it's going to be. It's just making a bit of contact down here that we have to just trim and adjust a bit.
There's that original tube.
It comes up and over the fender here.
Yep.
And stops right there. And then this cross piece has a standout that comes down and attaches to the fender here, so they don't actually join right here. We're going to create a bit of a standoff here as well to triangulate these things. But can I do this by myself?
Maybe. I mean, we've never actually shut it at all, but here, let me see.
Just the one-handing, and it's that torsion.
That's looking like it's already working way better than it ever did before.
Heavens, it's never been this good.
Wow. It almost shut at exactly the same time, and we haven't even finished building the frame.
So here, I'm just going to lift.
There's a little bit, yeah.
Delay, yeah.
But see, that's where I'm saying we haven't finished everything in there, and we're going to have some gas struts when we're done to assist with the lift. This is almost 90 degrees as well. So like, this is what it looks like. When your hood's open, this is everything you can see. But I mean, there it is. There's that aluminum crash bar, which these sides actually need to get pushed. You can maybe see that they flex a little bit there. Then you get pushed back in and welded up over here, as well as welded together. So it's not quite how it's going to be. But all of that will get hidden underneath the sort of the lower valence that we're going to do here. And there's no hinges. You can't see any hinges, and yet it hinges. Yes! That's awesome! Let's push on with the rest of the framing. That deserves a yeehaw. It works, and is hidden, and yet fairly solid. What a relief! Now, time for some gas struts.
We spent quite a lot of time planning out where some gas struts could live, where they should mount, because you could stand them up fairly straight, or you could stand them down on their side. You could have attached down here, or up here, or down. Like, there's a lot of different options, and maybe multiple different combinations could actually work. But what we're ultimately wanting is minimal effort to lift and minimal effort to shut. So the lifting is difficult because the hood's coming all the way down, and if you mount these wrong at the front, you'll get no help at the beginning, but then as it starts to come up, it'll take over and it might actually be too hard to shut. So there's a very happy middle ground that we're shooting for. Maybe think we found it with a couple of these gas struts from a 2014 through 18 Subaru Forester, of all things. So they're likely going to mount upside down here. That keeps the oil in the area where the piston is. Believe that's how you should do it. If it's not, we'll flip it around and it'll work the other way. But currently we've got a black line right there on this tube structure. We're actually going to tie into it, because that seems to be the strongest way of doing it in our minds. We'll also have the brace coming over here to this original tube that the factory wheel well already mounts into, so that'll actually brace it to it and just help to strengthen that up even more. That will mount the top spot right there. And then the bottom one, we'll just drill a hole in the side of the frame rail, put in a threaded insert, and we can attach, these are just little ball joints kind of things, just thread that in there. And a couple of those should do what we need. So let's just give it a shot. One of the things still not present in this area that we have to make sure we're allowing for is there's going to be an intake coming down from here. So if we came over top of the frame rails, if this mounts here and it swings back to there, that's going to go right through our intake tube. So that kind of motion is not going to work. But what we're actually thinking we're going to do is, rather than have to figure out where to mount these someplace else, is that the intake tube is actually going to sneak down underneath the frame rail. There is just enough room. So that's something to keep in mind there, but it's just, you know, we got parts that we can see, but there's also parts we can't see, and you have to make sure you're keeping those all into account.
Currently, the BMW hinges are maxed out, and this is a poor choice from a strength perspective, as this flex is coming entirely from the hinges themselves. We may redesign this lower portion later to add strength, but in the meanwhile, let's start by just pulling the hood back a hair and let the struts be the limiting factor instead. That may shorten their lives a bit, but I'd rather that than the hinges. And if you're curious how we actually found these struts, it's been a process. For instance, a strut can't compress more than half its length, plus a bit. So a 30-inch strut would compress down to, say, 18 inches, which affects fitment. And really, it's just a matter of trial and error with a tape measure to find what you need for your space. We knew we wanted one end to be somewhere on the frame rail, and the other a little over a third of the way up the hood. So something in the 27-inch range seemed appropriate. Determining the strut force ended up being a bigger problem, though. I spent too long trying to find a formula or calculator or something that would allow me to input a few numbers and get an answer. But any tool that felt promising required so much more detail than I cared to quantify that ultimately I gave up. So instead, let's just use common sense. Currently, it takes 45 pounds of force to get the hood to move past these little doohickeys, and about 15 pounds to begin closing again. Which is ridiculous, but that's also the least amount of effort possible since we're measuring from a point furthest away from the fulcrum. Lifting from the location of the gas struts, then, is going to require even more force to overcome the weight of the hood. So, from that point then, which conveniently is right in line with a strap in the wheel well, we can rig up a scale to measure how much weight is actually going straight down. And that will tell us how much upward force will be required to oppose it.
Okay, and go.
Good. That's a number we can use. Keep in mind here that 70 pounds pointing straight down, split across two gas struts, would be 35 pounds per strut. But they're not pointing straight up when the hood's closed, they're actually on an angle. The exact angle determining how much force those struts actually need, and I'm sure there's a formula for this, but my head hurts just thinking about it. So let's just think about it logically instead. If we put the strut at a 45-degree angle, half its force is going to go that way, and the other half of the force is going to go that way. So 70 pounds down on a 45-degree angle to push back up would require 70, 140 pounds. Split across 2 gas struts, that's 70 pounds. So we need 2 70-pound gas struts. Simple. Searching Rock Auto for Stabilus lift supports turned out to be the best method to whittle our options down, as they're a brand that actually lists all the specs we need to know, and by entering 1B, 2B, and so on in the part number field, we can avoid the annoying error message. Just the matter of an entire evening then of searching through every single possibility they offer and favoriting the closest ones until we had 2 options. No biggie. The Forster units should do the trick, but as a backup, I do still have other options. Let's just cross our fingers and hope.
They're attached. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to shut it yet. This is how everything's been going for us. They're certainly not doing nothing with keeping the hood from opening too far, so we need to rethink that a little bit. That might be as simple as actually getting slightly shorter gas struts. These were like less than 30 bucks, so I think maybe can chalk that up to some research and development costs, and get something a little bit shorter that just doesn't let the hood open as far. But we're going to see if it can shut, and we're going to see if it can open it again.
This is the inaugural shut.
Oh, that's way better than I was expecting. Look at that. It's trying to open the hood. Oh, Dad. Oh, we aced this. Look at this. I have to actually push down a little bit to latch it. Here, one hand. Oh.
Just a sec, I latched my side. So use just one hand?
One hand. One fingertip. Look at that. One fingertip. Yeah, it's not doing much of soft close at the end
Right, so
now.
you still have to watch the end.
15 pounds with no gas struts. So how much is it now? I'm fighting against 2 gas struts. What does it go up to?
About 20 maybe. I can't tell from the scale.
Looks like, yeah, 20.
Yeah.
So we only gained 5 pounds, even though we've got a combined 150 pounds of force.
Yeah.
276-pound gas struts. That's
The other test was the close it and then open it.
if I put this on here, I've got, that's 10 pounds 15. The other side's already up, 20. But then see now but that was that. So that's these little roller wheels right here hitting on here.
Guide.
That's the hardest part. Once I'm up to here, that's 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 5 pounds.
And there it sits.
And there, well, it'll sit down here even. I mean, I'm actually having to push.
That's very cool.
The weight is perfect. In fact, I wouldn't go any weaker on the gas struts because there's going to be more weight on the hood when it's finally done. But for it to basically just be able to...
Yeah.
And then... Like, look at that. Did you just see what I just did? We just push the hood down from this side, and then I go, boom. And there's the whole thing moving. It was never, ever that solid feeling. So really, it's just this limiting. We needed to get gas struts that were about an inch shorter.
We've removed the latches from the side of the hood to try and deal with this pressure point here as things are closing.
Oh, we're fine. We don't need that. I've already started moving. That's 5 pounds, 6, 7.
7 pounds.
7 pounds, and up she goes.
Good.
But I mean, look at that.
It's just a free one hand.
Just one hand up and down. Up she goes.
It's beautiful.
2 fingers in the wheel well even, which is that much harder to lift from.
As those guides are no longer needed then, we elected to chop them off, as honestly, they're a silly design that prevents paint from completely covering them anyways, and that results in this. So why not simplify where possible? The grinder makes quick work of the removal, and we can move on to the last step for today. The slop in those ball studs. They were getting bothersome, so we ordered some new ones, also taking this as an opportunity to upgrade from M6 threads to M8, because why not? The hood ain't light. To remove the old riv nuts then, the flap disc is deployed to grind off the face, and the remainder can be punched out with a hammer. Yes, the ones in the chassis rails are now trapped in there.
You heard her
Gone
rattle
for
all the way
all
down.
eternity.
When we drill some drain holes later, I'll make sure to fish them out. The upper holes get enlarged with the step drill next, and the new riv nuts can be squeezed in place. The lower holes are going to be repositioned slightly from where we had them. So first, we're remeasuring the balance of the hood, and we'll drill corresponding holes exactly where the struts require them.
You might just be able to get the idea.
Somewhere on
The
that sweep
center
we're
of this
looking
little
for.
band is going across that hole. Should clean up the burr on the inside a little bit so that the rib nut will actually be able to grip down on the flat surface. Keep it square.
Clamp, scalpel.
Suture.
Drain.
Done.
Wonderful. So we have the two new struts installed at new locations.
With new ball studs.
The new ball studs, yeah.
So there's much less slop like that than there was before.
So that's the hood at fully open. There she is,
Down she
it
goes.
fully closed.
And if I unload my side, it's almost trying to open itself.
Just very little movement there.
Yeah. Very nice controlled opening.
Now what happens? It does pick up quite a lot of
It does
momentum,
pick up
doesn't
speed,
it?
but that's not that sketchy anymore.
It's not getting the weight way over the top, is it?
Pulling from here, that's about 20 pounds to get it to move. But you can see it's dropped off now already, so now we're down to 10. It's about 10 pounds. It does take some effort to actually shut the hood, because by that point it's still trying to lift itself. But on the flip side, 2 pounds, it's like a pound.
And it's pulling from one corner, uniformly opening.
And up she goes. And then you could just let it go up the rest of the way on its own too. You could just let it go from here on its own. It's
Yeah,
not
that's not the end of the
That's
world.
not the end of the
No,
world. It's a little
no.
more violent than I'd like, but it's not the end of the world.
No, that's terrific. All right.
Call it success.
Call
after all
it
of this
success.
effort.
Yeah, great. Terrific. Thanks.
So boom, that's that job taken care of. And as a note from the future, it does look like we can leave the bumper behind on the frame with a little tweaking. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching. Huge thank you to all the patrons and donators who support our shenanigans, and if you'd like to help out as well, there are links in the description below. Keep wrenching, and we'll catch you next time.
Oh boy, I thought you were saying just a second. I'm not sure if I want to do this.